Welcome. We're going to work on means of egress, part 4. So if you will open your textbook so that we'll be able to review page 192. We can start there. So one of the things you've kind of gone through and you've kind of learned a little bit about egress, different parts, but we're going to talk about aisles and aisle access ways. And it's mainly a lot about talking about this particular figure 4.21 in your textbook. But we're going to go through it and kind of have a better understanding of what it is. Note this is different dimensions than stairs and ramps. It's calculated similar, but we have special width requirements. Remember, corridors are enclosed by full height walls, and aisles are pathways created by furniture. So a lot of times in classrooms and other places, you create pathways for people to walk. It's short portions of an aisle that leads to another aisle is called an aisle axway. So you have corridor, aisles, and of course aisles axways. So if you really read this, it talks about in through here, shows the floor plan of a restaurant, and in a sprinkled building it is occupied load of 100. This is an example. There are aisles and aisle access ways and different lengths and capacities. Each aisle and aisle axway must be determined separately. You know, it's not just putting the furniture down and see if it works. You've got to actually calculate how you go through. Some widths will be determined by the minimum set by the codes, and others will require calculations. Determine the main aisle widths indicated by the W in the figure. The occupant load of space and the number of exits must be calculated. Then the calculated exit width should be compared to the minimum width required by the codes. The larger width should be used in the design. This is where you kind of have to go back to the life safety code table, figure 4.19, when we're talking about how many 1 to 500, how many exits you have. 501 to 1000 you would have, of course. So 3 exits. So what you've got to do is first multiply the occupant load by 100 by 0.2 to get a total exit width of 20 inches. Then because there are 2 exits, remember, you have to divide the total exit width between the 2 exits. So we know how to do and figure out the actual doorways. So the calculated exit width is 10. However, the code set a minimum width of aisle of 36 inches. For the assembly occupancy situation, the main aisle are therefore required to at least 36 inches wide, which of course you see in this diagram. Here's our main exit. When you see these exit widths are 36 inches. But if you go back and you try to learn, the occupant load, of course, is much greater. However, the calculated aisle width may be larger than the required minimum aisle width. For example, the occupant load was 400. The calculated width would be 80 inches. So what you're going to do, you're going to take the width would be split by 2. Exits suggestion aisles width of 40 inches. So you're going to take the 400 times 0.2 equals 80. Divided by 2 equals 40 inches. That's how they got the 40 inches here. The main aisle would then be 42 inches width instead of the minimum 36 inches, because that is the minimum aisle width for an aisle with seating on both sides and serving more than 50 seats. Remember, if it's below 50 in a restaurant, it would be a business, but we're above 50, so it is an assembly. Next, the widths of the aisle accessways must be determined. Some are determined by standard widths given by the code. For example, codes do not require a minimum width for aisle accessway. At the lower right of the plan, it is limited length and capacity. The minimum width at the aisle accessway B at the left of the plan is 12 inches. This is added to the 19 inches required for the chair to abstain. Here, of course, is giving you all of this 12 inches plus 0.5, and it goes through. But what I want you to do is I want you to read through this, but I want you to go back then and look, because to me it's easier stated in your IBC code book. So look at your IBC code book and look on page, or look at indicator 1028.10.1.1. Because remember, we're talking aisle axware, serving arrangement, seating, or counter shall be sufficient clear, which conform to the capacity required for section 105.1, but shall not have less than a minimum of 12 inches of width plus a ½ inch of width for each additional foot or fraction thereof beyond 12 feet. Okay? So, what that means, if we're going back and we're looking at this particular drawing, and this is like 17 feet in through here, okay? What we're talking about is our aisle access. We know we have to have 12 inches in between the two, okay? So for every foot longer, you have to add a ½ inch so that people will be able, this person will be able to get through here. So ever it's going through here, it's 17, we have 12. For every foot, you have to add a ½ inch. Okay? Alright, so let's continue a little bit so that you kind of have an understanding of how this works. So we know it says tables and chairs in a restaurant, minimum typical width 36 inches. Code does not allow some non-public aisles to be less than 36 inches. Remember, ADA guidelines include various widths, and accessible routes are necessary in public spaces, restaurants, cafeterias, libraries. So you can go through and look at that. So here we are, and we're looking at our particular drawing. Minimum widths are determined by the length of your axway. These are aisles. This is aisle axway. Okay? If an aisle axway at a row of tables is less than 6 feet, is used by 4 or less, code does not set minimum widths. Okay? Normally, of course, we say 12, you allow 12 inches here between the back of the chair and the back of the chair, and you allow 19 inches, okay, for someone to be able to sit there. And then you still, this person's going to have to squeeze through. However, if it's between 6 and 12 feet in length, the axway must be at least 12 inches plus 19 inches for chair. Okay? Longer aisle axways, between 12 and 30 feet long, are separated. Calculations require 12.5, which is the ½ inch, remember we talked about, going up. So we into calculations require 12 plus a ½ inch, okay, depending on the length that we're talking about in through here. Then a width is measured from edge of table to chair, 19 inches to allow chair. So what we do is we measure from the center of the last chair into the length. So if it is 12 feet plus 2½ inches, so a ½ inch for everything over. Okay? So there's all types of things, because we're going to do conference seatings and stuff. Sometimes you have dual access code requirements. What that's talking about, if you have where you could go out one direction here or one direction here. So what you're going to do is you're going to figure the middle of this, and then from here to here is 12, and from here to here is 12. Fixed tables and seating. If you look in the IBC 1028.1, which we were kind of at, let me get back over here so you'll be able to see it. Okay, talking about lengths, cannot exceed 30 feet from any seat to the point where a person has a choice. You know, this is kind of giving you some things. So like if you're designing a stadium, You can't have it more than 30 feet where somebody has a choice. So therefore, we're ended up having and creating more aisles for others. Clear aisle access, serving seating rows. It gives you, of course, exactly what you need to have. And then here is the dual access. For rows of seating served by aisles or doorways at both ends, there shall not be more than 100 seats per row. The minimum clear width of 12 inches between rows shall be increased by 0.3 for every additional seat beyond 14 seats, but the minimum clear width is not required to exceed 22 inches. So what it's saying that 19 plus the 22 is the maximum that you have to have. Okay? So the formula that I've kind of talked about here in our PowerPoint, it talks about 19 inches from table to table minimum row spacing, y plus x plus y. 12 inches minimum clear width for egress is required for tables 12 feet or less in length. For tables greater than 12 feet in length, a half inch per foot must be added to the dimension of y for every foot or fraction of. So if it's 12 foot 6, you still have to add for that half inch. Length is to be measured from the center of the seat furthest from an aisle. However, table length is more conservative with loose seating. I know that you've been to lots of different types of concerts and stuff, and you think, oh my gosh, I have no knee room or whatsoever to that. A lot of times they'll end up measuring because people can stand, and then from the standing motion they're going to measure from the back of the chair to the other one to be able to get out. Row depth is increased by 1 inch to provide adequate clear space for egress based on the 4-foot increase in an overall table length or 12 feet from center. So go back and look at the IBC code book to kind of understand this. If there's single aisle code requirements for seating, of course, or fixed tables, that means we have no access way here at the end. Okay, that's of course seeing the table, and there's another table here. We've got to have add the room, if you'll notice here, for somebody to be able to get out. You've got to understand what X is and Y. X, of course, is what you're allowing here for the person to sit in the chair, and Y is what we've got to figure. So you can look and see how it is from table to table, length to measurement. X dimension will vary depending on the chair, okay? Because the chair, of course, ends up having maybe bigger arms, other items. So you need to look at that to be able to understand it. Remember code requirement, dual entrance. 12 inches clear required for 14 or fewer chairs in the row. If 15 or more chairs in the dual access row, 12-inch clear space is to be increased by 0.3 per chair. So this is dual access. That's where we're talking about a lot of stadiums or theaters or other things. So we've got to go back through and look at it. So row spacing is increased by 5/8 of an inch to provide adequate clear space for 2 chairs over 14 inches in the dual access row and to maintain 18 inches table depth. So aisles and aisles access way created by a variety of interior furnishings and elements. Business mercantile occupancies typically require that aisle to be a minimum of 36 inches and access ways created by displays 30 inches. I know that you're going to say I go in every department store and I end up seeing almost not being able to get through some of the access ways, and that is true. But when a drawing is turned in, this is what's shown, but you can't guarantee what our owner may end up doing. So minimums may not be wide enough to provide accessible paths, but you have to look at the occupant load to be able to get things figured out. So I hope you will go through and read all of this about aisle accessway widths in your IBC code book and have an understanding of that. So Happy reading.